My own son and his wife locked my sick wife and me in the basement of our Victorian home, screaming, "This house is ours now." Sitting in that dampness, I said to Isadora, "Hush, they don't know what's hidden behind that brick wall." When they left, I moved a loose brick and revealed to my wife a secret I had kept for 43 years, one about my true identity that will destroy everything they think they know about the Ashford name. Hello, dear listeners. Thank you for joining me today. Before I begin my story, I would be grateful if you could subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me which state or country you're listening from. It always warms my heart to see how far our stories travel. Please enjoy listening. This Victorian house has been breathing for over a century. Built in 1922 by my adoptive father, Henry Ashford, it stands proud on Drayton Street in Savannah's historic district. The morning sun filters through Spanish moss, casting dancing shadows across our wraparound porch. I have called this place home for 43 years. Isadora and I moved here as newlyweds, young and full of dreams. We raised our son Dalton within these walls, watching him take his first steps on the polished oak floors. This house witnessed our joy when he graduated, our pride when he started his business, our happiness when he brought Arabella home as his bride. But that was 3 years ago. 3 long, suffocating years since they moved in with us. It started when Isadora had her first stroke. Dalton suggested they move into the master suite upstairs to help out. "Just temporarily, Dad," he said. We moved downstairs to Henry's old study so Isadora wouldn't have to climb stairs. Temporarily became permanently. Their belongings invaded every corner. Arabella's expensive perfumes replaced Isadora's simple lavender sachets. Their loud conversations about money echoed through rooms that once knew only gentle voices. This morning started like every other. I woke before dawn to prepare Isadora's medication and fix her breakfast. She can barely speak since the second stroke, but her eyes still sparkle when I read her poems. I was making her soft scrambled eggs when Arabella appeared in the doorway. "That smell again," she said, not hiding her disgust. She wore a silk robe worth more than most people's monthly salary. "Wilder, couldn't you cook something normal? This house always smells like a nursing home." I kept stirring the eggs jaw tight. "Your mother-in-law enjoys these eggs. They're easy for her to swallow." "She's not really eating anyway." Arabella continued pouring expensive coffee. "Dr. Cross said she might need a feeding tube soon. Why pretend otherwise?" The casual cruelty in her voice made my chest tighten. This woman had never shown genuine care for Isadora. To her, my wife was just an inconvenience, an obstacle to the lifestyle she felt entitled to in our home. I carried the breakfast tray to our bedroom where Isadora sat propped against pillows, staring at the garden we'd planted together decades ago. Her hand trembled as I helped her eat, but she managed a small smile. In that moment, surrounded by morning light and jasmine blooming outside, I felt a flicker of our old peace. But peace was a luxury we could no longer afford. The floorboards upstairs groaned under heavy footsteps. Dalton was awake, and soon he'd join Arabella in the kitchen. They'd talk in hushed tones about things they thought I couldn't hear. Property values, inheritance laws, the burden of aging parents. Their words cut deeper than they knew. As I sat beside Isadora, holding her fragile hand, I had no idea this would be our last normal morning. An hour later, the floorboards upstairs finally went still. I heard murmured voices, then the deliberate descent of footsteps along the grand staircase. Dalton appeared first in his polished navy suit, followed by Arabella in a tailored dress that probably cost more than most families spend on groceries in a month. Their entrance into the dining room carried an unsettling sense of purpose that tightened my stomach. This wasn't their usual casual drift through the house. It was orchestrated. Dalton pulled out the chair at the head of the mahogany table, Henry's old seat, before speaking in the professional, detached tone he used with clients. "Dad, we need to talk. Seriously." Arabella sat beside him, folding her manicured hands, eyes shining with that predatory glint I knew too well. They had come prepared. "It's about the house," Dalton said, still not looking at me. "With Mom's condition and everything coming, we've been thinking about the inheritance situation, the bureaucracy, the legal mess when the time comes." A coldness spread through me, not from his meaning, but from the casual way he delivered it. Arabella leaned forward, voice syrupy with false concern. "We want to help you avoid problems later. You should sign the house over to Dalton now. A simple gift deed, just a formality." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were official documents already filled out, evidence they had planned this for weeks. The house is worth $750,000, Dalton added. This keeps us out of probate. No government interference. I didn't touch the papers. No. The word cracked through the room. Arabella's smile dropped. What do you mean? No, we're trying to help you. Do you want your only son dealing with government offices when you can't handle things? I understand everything I said, holding her gaze, and that's why the answer is no. Dalton's face reddened. We live here, take care of you, pay for Mom's medications. It's practically our house already. You live in my house, I corrected, and I take care of your mother. Dalton stood abruptly, his chair scraping. Be reasonable. Mom needs professional care. Magnolia Manor, outside Atlanta. $4,500 a month. 24-hour staff. You could visit weekends? The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. They had already researched places, already planned our removal from our own home. You want to warehouse us, I said quietly. We want what's best for everyone, Arabella snapped. You're being selfish. Dalton has a right to this house. He carries the Ashford name. Something dark flickered in Dalton's eyes. Enough. I'm done arguing. He grabbed my arm, not painfully, but with authority, and dragged me toward the basement door. At 72, I couldn't match his strength. Dalton, what are you doing? I shouted. This is our house now, he roared, shoving me toward the steep stairs. The door slammed, the bolt locked. In the darkness, only my ragged breathing and Isadora's frightened whimper remained. We were prisoners in our own home. The basement was a tomb of forgotten memories. Cold stone walls pressed in around us, and the musty smell of decades-old dampness filled my lungs. The only light came from a thin crack under the door above, casting everything in eerie twilight. Isadora trembled beside me on the rough wooden steps. Her breathing was shallow and labored, each exhale a small cloud in the chilly air. I wrapped my arm around her frail shoulders, feeling how much weight she'd lost since the second stroke. Her body felt as delicate as autumn leaves. It's going to be all right, sweetheart, I whispered, though the words felt hollow in this concrete prison. They'll come to their senses soon. But then I heard the sound that shattered my hope. Car doors slamming, an engine starting, the crunch of gravel as they backed out of our driveway. Dalton and Arabella were leaving us here locked in our own basement like discarded furniture. The silence that followed was deafening. No footsteps above, no voices, just the steady drip of condensation and Isadora's frightened breathing. We were completely alone. Hours crawled by, my legs cramped from sitting on the hard steps, but I didn't dare move far from Isadora. She dozed fitfully against my shoulder, occasionally jerking awake with small sounds of confusion. Each time I smoothed her gray hair and murmured reassurances, I didn't believe myself. The basement hadn't been used for storage in years. Cobwebs draped the corners like funeral shrouds, and empty mason jars lined forgotten shelves. This was where Henry used to keep his wine collection back when this house hosted elegant dinner parties. Now it felt like a crypt. As darkness deepened outside, the crack of light under the door grew dimmer. Soon we'd be in complete blackness. The thought terrified me, not for myself, but for Isadora. In her confused state, total darkness might send her into panic. That's when I remembered Henry's words. I was 18 when he brought me down here, just months after adopting me from the state orphanage. He'd been showing me where the water shut off, was explaining the old electrical system. But then he'd stopped at the far wall, the one made of rough fieldstone. Wilder, he'd said, his voice unusually serious, there's something here you need to know about. Something for the most desperate of times. His weathered hand had pressed against one particular stone. Your real father taught me that a man should always have a final card to play. Promise me you'll remember this place. I'd been young and distracted, more interested in starting my new life than dwelling on old secrets. But now, 43 years later, those words echoed with crystal clarity. Desperate times. If this wasn't desperate, what was? Isadora, honey, I need to check something, I whispered, helping her lean against the stair railing. Stay right here. I'll be just a few feet away. I stood on shaking legs and made my way carefully across the uneven floor. Old furniture loomed like sleeping giants in the gloom. I bumped into a forgotten rocking chair, stubbed my toe on a wooden crate, but kept moving toward the back wall. The fieldstone foundation felt rough and cold under my palms. I ran my hands along the surface, searching for anything unusual. Most of the stones were mortared solidly in place, but then my fingers found what I was looking for. One stone was different from the others. It moved slightly under pressure as if it had been carefully loosened and replaced countless times over the decades. My heart pounded as I pressed harder, feeling it give way with a soft grinding sound. The stone slid inward, revealing a dark cavity behind it. I reached into the hidden space, my fingers trembling with anticipation and fear. What I found was small, rectangular, and cold to the touch. Carefully I pulled it out, an old tobacco tin, the kind popular when I was a child. Its surface was tarnished with age, but I could still make out faded letters, Lucky Strike. "What is it?" Isadora's voice was barely a whisper from across the basement. "I'm not sure yet, sweetheart," I called back, though my pulse quickened. Whatever Henry had hidden here, it was important enough to keep secret for over 4 decades. I made my way back to the steps, clutching the tin like a lifeline. Then I remembered Henry's old toolbox should still be on the shelf near the stairs. I fumbled around until my fingers found it, and inside, miraculously, was a small flashlight that still worked when I clicked it on. The weak beam was enough. Sitting beside Isadora again, I held the tin under the flashlight's glow. The lid was stuck tight with age and moisture, but after several attempts, it finally popped open with a soft click. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, were papers. Old papers yellowed with time, but still legible. My hands shook as I unfolded the first document under the flashlight beam. It was a birth certificate, but not mine, at least not the one I'd always known. This one bore a name that made my blood freeze: Marcus Thompson, born in Atlanta, Georgia, on the same date as my birthday. Mother's name, Sarah Thompson. Father's name, William Thompson. But as I unfolded the second document, the impossible became undeniable. It was an adoption decree, official and stamped. Marcus Thompson, aged 6 months, adopted by Henry Ashford, a widowed physician of Savannah, Georgia. The child's new name, Wilder Ashford. My entire identity, everything I thought I knew about myself, crumbled in that moment. I wasn't Henry's nephew taken in after my parents died in a car accident. The story I'd been told my whole life. I was Marcus Thompson, adopted from complete strangers. The third document was a letter written in Henry's familiar handwriting. Under the flashlight's beam, I could clearly read, "My dear son, if you are reading this, desperate circumstances have brought you to this hiding place. Your father, William Thompson, was Chief of Staff to Governor Talmadge, a brilliant man who served his state with honor. But in 1952, he was accused of selling classified information, betraying military secrets. I knew William personally as physician for the governor's mansion, and I never believed those accusations. But your father became a scapegoat. He took his own life in prison rather than endure a public trial that would destroy his family forever. Your mother, Sarah, was left with nothing but shame and a baby whose father's name had become poison in Georgia politics. I offered to adopt you, to give you my name and protection. The Thompson name would have followed you like a shadow, closing doors that the Ashford name opened. Guard this secret, my son. There are those who would use it to destroy everything you've built." My mind reeled with the implications. Everything. My marriage to Isadora, my acceptance into Savannah's social circles, my business connections, even Dalton's pride in the Ashford legacy, all of it was built on a foundation that could crumble if this truth ever came to light. "Wilder." Isadora's voice was stronger now, concerned. "What does it say?" The flashlight beam trembled in my hand as I watched Isadora's face process what she was seeing. Her eyes moved from the birth certificate to the adoption papers, then to Henry's letter. I could see the moment understanding dawned. Her mouth opened slightly, and she looked at me as if seeing a stranger. "Marcus Thompson," she whispered, her voice barely audible. You're not really Wilder Ashford." I set the flashlight down carefully, its beam creating a small circle of light in our dark prison. "No, sweetheart, I'm not." The words felt strange on my tongue, as if I were confessing to a crime I'd unknowingly committed. "I just learned this myself right now, reading Henry's letter. I'm as shocked as you are." She reached out with a shaking hand to touch my face, her fingers tracing the familiar lines she'd known for decades. "What did Henry tell you growing up? What lies did we both believe?" My chest tightened as I recalled the carefully constructed story. He told me my parents were his distant relatives, good people who died in a car accident when I was 6 months old. He said he took me in because family should care for family. I never questioned it. Why would I? "And now," she asked, her voice barely a whisper, "now I realize everything I thought I knew about myself is a lie." I picked up Henry's letter again, my hands shaking. According to this, my real father was William Thompson, Chief of Staff to the Governor. But he was accused of selling classified military information, of betraying state secrets. I could see her face pale in the flashlight's glow. Accused? Henry writes that he never believed the accusations that William became a scapegoat. But it didn't matter. William Thompson took his own life in prison rather than face a public trial. His name became poison in Georgia politics. Isadora was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what this meant. So Henry saved you? He saved me from being the son of a man branded a traitor. But he also built my entire life on a lie. Our marriage, my business, relationships, our place in Savannah society. All of it exists because people believe I'm an Ashford, not a Thompson. What does this mean for us now? She asked, though I could see in her eyes that she was beginning to understand. It means we have something Dalton doesn't know about, I said slowly, the plan forming in my mind. He spent his whole life being proud of the Ashford name, building his investment business on that reputation. His clients are politicians, old Georgia families who care deeply about bloodlines and honor. A slow understanding spread across her weathered features. If they knew he was the grandson of William Thompson, his business would collapse overnight. No politician would trust him with their financial information. No elite family would let him manage their wealth. The very people he courts would turn their backs on him. And he has no idea, she breathed. None at all. To him, we're just inconvenient old people standing in the way of his inheritance. He thinks the Ashford name gives him the right to everything. This house, respect, social standing. But it's all built on Henry's carefully constructed lie. I looked at the papers scattered around us, then back at my wife's face. If our son wants to treat us like prisoners in our own home, maybe it's time he learned what real consequences feel like. The weight of 43 years of deception settled on my shoulders. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than helplessness. I felt power. Above us, floorboards creaked. Heavy footsteps crossed the kitchen, then moved toward the basement door. My heart jumped into my throat. "They're coming back," I whispered quickly, gathering the papers and stuffing them back into the tobacco tin. The heavy bolts scraped against metal, and suddenly light flooded our dark prison. Dalton stood silhouetted in the doorway, his expensive suit wrinkled from whatever he'd been doing while we sat in that basement for hours. Behind him, Arabella peered down with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. "Well," Dalton asked, his voice dripping with smugness, "have you had enough time to think about our offer?" I helped Isadora to her feet, feeling how much weaker she'd become during our imprisonment. Her legs trembled beneath her, and I could hear the wheeze in her breathing had gotten worse. The cold, damp air had not been kind to her condition. "Dalton," I said, letting exhaustion and defeat color my voice. "Your mother, she needs medical attention. The stress, the cold air down there. Please let me call Dr. Cross." Arabella stepped forward, her face brightening with what looked like genuine concern. "Oh my God, is she having another episode? We can't have her collapsing on us." "Just let me make one phone call," I pleaded, supporting Isadora's weight against my shoulder. "Dr. Cross knows her condition. She needs to be examined." Dalton studied us both for a moment, clearly weighing his options. A sick mother-in-law was the last thing he wanted on his hands. "Fine," he said finally. "One call, but make it quick and no funny business." He handed me his cell phone, watching carefully as I dialed. But the number I called wasn't Dr. Minerva Cross. It was one I'd memorized from a business card I'd kept in my wallet for 3 years. A lawyer who specialized in complex family disputes. "Fairchild and Associates," came the crisp voice on the other end. "Yes, this is Wilder Ashford," I said, keeping my voice steady and clinical. "I need to schedule an urgent consultation regarding a medical directive for my wife. Can Mr. Fairchild see me this afternoon?" Dalton relaxed slightly, hearing what sounded like a routine medical appointment. Arabella had already lost interest and was examining her manicured nails. "Certainly, Mr. Ashford," the receptionist replied. "Mr. Fairchild has an opening at 4 o'clock. Shall I put you down?" "Yes, thank you. I'll bring all the necessary documentation with me." I ended the call and handed the phone back to Dalton. "Dr. Cross wants to see her medical records and insurance information. I need to gather some paperwork and meet with her this afternoon." "Good," Dalton said, pocketing his phone. "Maybe now you'll start being reasonable about what's best for everyone." "Maybe I will," I replied quietly, helping Isadora toward our bedroom. "Maybe I will." 3 hours later, I sat across from Reginald Fairchild in his downtown Savannah office. He was a man in his 50s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I'd brought Henry's tobacco tin with me, and now its contents lay spread across his polished mahogany desk. Fairchild studied the birth certificate, the adoption papers, and Henry's letter with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. When he finally looked up, there was something predatory in his smile. "Mr. Ashford, or should I say Mr. Thompson, this is quite remarkable," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Your son has built his entire investment business on relationships with Georgia's political elite, hasn't he?" "Yes," I replied. "His client list reads like a who's who of state government and old Savannah families, and they trust him because they believe he comes from honorable Ashford stock." "Exactly." Fairchild's smile widened. "Well, Mr. Thompson, I believe we have everything we need." 1 week later, I was sitting in our living room reading the morning paper when the doorbell rang. Through the lace curtains, I could see a black sedan parked in our driveway. Expensive professional, the kind of car that meant serious business. Reginald Fairchild stood on our wraparound porch, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Behind him stood a younger man in an equally sharp suit, clearly another lawyer from his firm. "Mr. Ashford," Reginald said with a slight nod, "I believe we have some documents to deliver." The sound of footsteps on the stairs told me Dalton had heard the doorbell. He appeared in the hallway, straightening his tie, clearly curious about our unexpected visitors. Arabella followed close behind her face, already showing suspicious concern. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Dalton asked, stepping forward with the confident air of a man who believed he owned everything in sight. "Dalton Ashford." Reginald asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "That's right. And you are—" "Reginald Fairchild, attorney at law. I represent the legal interests of the actual owner of this property." He opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency and withdrew a thick manila envelope. "This is for you." Dalton took the envelope with obvious confusion, tearing it open with casual arrogance. I watched his face as he began to read, saw the exact moment when confusion transformed into disbelief, then into something approaching panic. "Eviction notice," he sputtered, his voice cracking. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" Arabella snatched the papers from his hands, her eyes scanning the legal language with growing alarm. "This says the house belongs to Wilder, not you. This says our deed of gift." She looked up, face pale. "Fraudulent." "I'm afraid so," Reginald replied with professional calm. "Our investigation has revealed that the document you presented as a legitimate transfer of ownership is in fact a rather poorly executed forgery. The notary whose seal appears on your papers died 2 years before the alleged signing date." "That's impossible," Dalton said, but his voice lacked conviction. "What's more concerning," Reginald continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge, "is that this attempted fraud raises serious questions about your family's legal standing in this community, questions that might require a full public investigation into your genealogical background, your true heritage, your right to use the Ashford name in your business dealings." The color drained completely from Dalton's face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the kind of investigation that makes front-page news in the Savannah Morning News, Mr. Ashford. The kind that your business partners and clients tend to read over their morning coffee. The kind that raises uncomfortable questions about bloodlines and family honor." Arabella grabbed Dalton's arm, her fingernails digging into his expensive suit jacket. "What genealogical background?" "You have 30 days to vacate the premises," Reginald concluded, snapping his briefcase shut. As the lawyers walked back to their sedan, I noticed Dalton's hands were shaking as he pulled out his cell phone. "My business partners," he said, his voice hollow, "they're going to start asking questions." 3 days later, our living room was packed with people I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. Dalton had called an emergency family meeting, and the urgency in his voice had brought them all running. Cousin Peter sat stiffly on our antique sofa, his wife Mary beside him, clutching her purse like a shield. 2 of Dalton's business partners, men in expensive suits who usually treated me with polite deference, occupied the wing-back chairs near the fireplace. The atmosphere was thick with tension and barely concealed panic. I could see it in Dalton's face, the way his hands trembled slightly as he paced back and forth in front of Henry's old mahogany bookshelf. Arabella sat perched on the edge of an ottoman, her usual composure cracked like a broken mirror. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." Dalton began, his voice carrying that forced confidence of a man trying to convince himself as much as his audience. "We're dealing with a family crisis here, a legal attack on our home, our heritage, everything the Ashford name represents. He gestured toward me with barely contained frustration. My father has been influenced by an unscrupulous lawyer who's filling his head with lies about property ownership and family history. At his age, with the stress of caring for Mom, I think he's becoming confused about reality. Peter shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Welder's always been sharp as a tack, Dalton. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we need to consider conservatorship. Dalton said the words tumbling out in a rush. Dad's making decisions that could destroy this family's reputation, tear apart everything we've built. He's believing conspiracy theories about forged documents and genealogical investigations. Mary leaned forward, her voice gentle but concerned. Wilder, dear, is this true? Are you having trouble with memory or judgment? I looked around the room at these people, some family, some business associates, all of whom had known me for decades. They'd seen me build a successful career, raise a son, care for my wife through her illness. The suggestion that I was mentally incompetent was so absurd it was almost insulting. No, Mary, I said quietly, standing up from my chair. My memory and judgment are perfectly clear. In fact, I'd like to share something with all of you that might explain why Dalton is so desperate to discredit me. I walked to the small side table where I'd placed Henry's tobacco tin that morning, knowing this moment would come. Dalton is right about one thing. This is about family history and heritage, but not in the way he thinks. Dad, don't, Dalton warned, his voice sharp with panic. You're going to embarrass yourself. The only person who should be embarrassed, I said, opening the tin and removing the yellowed papers, is the man who spent his entire life taking pride in a name that isn't rightfully his. The room went dead silent. I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the distant sound of traffic on Drayton Street, the sharp intake of breath from Mary. My real name is Marcus Thompson. I continued, holding up the birth certificate so everyone could see it. I was adopted as an infant by Henry Ashford after my biological father, William Thompson, was accused of selling state secrets and died in prison rather than face trial. Peter's face went white. Mary's hand flew to her mouth. The business partners exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their sudden desire to be anywhere else. Dalton has built his investment firm on relationships with Georgia's political elite, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. His clients trust him because they believe he comes from honorable Ashford stock, but he doesn't. He's the grandson of a man accused of treason, and every handshake, every deal, every client relationship is built on that lie. The room fell silent as everyone stared at my son in disgust. 6 months have passed since that devastating afternoon in our living room, and the silence in our Victorian house has never felt so peaceful. The kind of silence that comes not from emptiness, but from the absence of toxicity, from the removal of people who brought nothing but tension and greed into our home. Dalton and Arabella left Savannah the very next day. I heard through Cousin Peter that they'd packed their belongings in the middle of the night like thieves fleeing a crime scene. Within a week, Dalton's investment firm had collapsed. His clients, those prestigious political families in old Georgia money who valued reputation above all else, withdrew their accounts faster than you could say Thompson. The scandal of his fraudulent deed, combined with the revelation of his true heritage, made him radioactive in Savannah's tight-knit financial community. They moved to some small town in Alabama, I'm told. Arabella found work as a receptionist at a beauty salon. Dalton, well, nobody seems to know what Dalton does now. He certainly doesn't call or write. For me, he simply ceased to exist like the ghost I once told him he was. But this story isn't really about Dalton's downfall. It's about what came after. Isadora's health has improved remarkably since the stress left our house. Without the constant tension, without Arabella's cruel comments, and Dalton's entitled demands, my wife has found a kind of peace that's allowed her body to heal. She still struggles with the effects of her strokes, but her appetite has returned. Her sleep is restful, and most importantly, her smile has come back. We've made some changes to the house. That basement where we discovered the truth about my past, I hired contractors to transform it into something beautiful. A bright, airy space with proper lighting and ventilation. It's become my personal study, lined with bookshelves and filled with comfortable chairs. Sometimes I sit down there in the evenings, not thinking about secrets hidden behind walls, but simply enjoying the quiet satisfaction of a space reclaimed. Our neighbor, Leopold Gray, stops by most afternoons now, He's a widower about my age who lives 3 houses down, and he's become something of a godsend. He helps with yard work, brings us vegetables from his garden, and most importantly, he treats Isadora with the gentle respect she deserves. It's funny how removing toxic people from your life makes room for genuinely good ones to enter. I've learned something profound in these past months. Family isn't just about blood or shared names. It's about love, respect, and genuine care for one another's well-being. Dalton shared my adopted name, lived in my house, and called me father for 40 years. But Leopold, who's known us for 6 months, has shown more true family spirit than my son ever did. The Ashford name that I carried with such fear for so many years, it doesn't define me anymore. Neither does the Thompson name I was born with. I am simply Wilder, a man who loves his wife, tends his garden, and has learned that the most precious inheritance we can leave behind isn't money or property, but the example of how we treat the people who depend on us. Henry saved me from the shame of my father's accusations, but in the end, it was standing up to my own son's greed that truly set me free. Remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars or deeds, but in the love we give and the dignity we maintain, even in our darkest hours. Looking back on this true story, I realize I made a terrible mistake that nearly cost me everything. I spent 72 years living a lie, carrying the weight of a secret that didn't need to be shameful. Don't be like me. Don't let fear of judgment keep you from living authentically. The truth has a way of setting us free, even when we think it will destroy us. My grandpa's stories taught me that family isn't about bloodlines or prestigious names. It's about the people who stand by you when darkness falls, who care for you without expecting anything in return. Henry Ashford gave me his name, but it was Isadora's unwavering love and Leopold's genuine friendship that showed me what true family really means. This true story isn't just about inheritance or greed. It's about the inheritance of character we pass down to future generations. We can choose to raise children who value compassion over wealth, integrity over status. God knows I failed in that regard with Dalton, but perhaps sharing these grandpa stories can help others avoid my mistakes. The greatest lesson from this true story: don't wait for crisis to reveal your authentic self. Don't let pride and fear rob you of genuine relationships. The people who truly matter will love you for who you are not, for the name you carry, or the house you own. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt grandpa stories, and tell me in the comments, what family lesson has shaped your life the most? Your stories matter just as much as mine.